much for joining me today. I'm very excited to be part of the Altenew 2017 March release blog hop. In this blog hop are a bunch of fabulous designers, and we're all sharing projects and ideas using some of the newest products from Altenew. Here's a look at all the products I've got here from the new release. There are new stencils and spray inks included in this release, which is what I'm going to be using today. So we've got sketch lines, layered medallions, and the floral drape. And then I also have 3 different spray inks that are part of the new release. I believe there are about 12 new colors of their spray inks, so this is a new product line for them. And these are really fun. They're a glimmery spray mix, so they have a bit of shimmer to them. So you'll notice at the bottom they have a little bit of a mica appearance. You need to shake that up to distribute the mica evenly throughout the spray ink. So I'll give this a good shake, and you can start to see how it clears up along the bottom. That's letting you know that it's really mixed really well. So you can see here they're ready to go, and we can go ahead and start creating with them. So I'm going to share different ways on how to use the stencils and spray inks that are included in the new March 2017 release. There are lots of ways that you can use sprays and inks, and I'm just going to be covering 7 of them today. So I'm going to first start off and share how I created the background on this particular card. So I'm using the sketch line stencil, and I used that to create a subtle background on the back of this card. I really liked the fun feel of this stencil, and I think it matched really well with the Be Strong stamp set, which was released previously from Altenew. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how I did the background, and on all of these cards I'm only going to be showing you how I did the techniques with the stencils and the spray inks, just because there's a lot to cover and it would be a really long video if I tried to show how I created the entire card from start to finish. So I first started off by taking the stencil, and I used some Altenew dye inks to go ahead and start blending some color through the stencil onto some yellow cardstock. I'm using ink duster brushes because I really like using these for detailed stencils such as this. You could use an ink blending tool though and get really similar effects. So I'm going to go ahead and continue adding ink through the stencil, first starting off with Warm Sunshine. Now Warm Sunshine on this color of cardstock is very light, so I wanted to darken it up just a little bit with a bit of caramel toffee. I'm being very light-handed with this color because I want it to be very subtle. So after I've gone ahead and blended those 2 colors onto my paper, I'll go ahead and remove the stencil, and you can see the beautiful subtle design we have going on here for the background. This is perfect for creating a subtle background behind a bunch of focal elements that you're going to be placing onto a card, such as the cactuses and little lights and the sentiment that I have added on this card from the Be Strong stamp set. My next 2 cards feature the layered medallion bee stencil, and I used this 2 different ways to create this really beautiful design on the dark color of navy blue cardstock. Here's the stencil here. You can see it's stained from me using it, and I went ahead and used the sentiment from the Be Strong sentiment in the corner of these cards. I went ahead and used the Ocean Waves spray, and that creates a beautiful silvery shimmer on these cards. The shimmers in these spray inks are either a silvery or golden tone, depending on the color tone of the actual spray ink itself. So like the Ocean Waves, because it's blue, it has a silvery mica. And then for something, say, like the Coral Berry, which I used on another card, that one has more of a golden tone to it. But you can see the shimmer that these cards have from that spray ink. It is so beautiful. And these are really fun to be able to create some really pretty effects on your cards. So I started off first by spraying directly onto my cardstock with the stencil laid on top. I didn't add any ink or anything on this. I just wanted to go directly to the paper with my spray ink. So I shook it up really well, and I went ahead and spritzed this really well with the spray ink. I let that sit for a second, added a few more drops, and then I went ahead and lifted the stencil off, and you can see the gorgeous shimmery design that we have here through the stencil onto this navy cardstock. It's so beautiful. Here's a look at how it dried, and the shimmer is just really intense, really sparkly, and I really love it. I think it's a really fun way to be able to use these spray inks to create some nice designs on your cards. For this card, I went ahead and applied a bit of sapphire ink from Altenew onto the navy blue cardstock with that same stencil before taking the spray ink and spritzing this over top of the entire panel. So I'm covering the entire panel with this spray ink to be a shimmer, unlike where I used the stencil to create the shimmery design for the first panel. So this one creates a total all-over shimmer over top of a stencil design. So this is really pretty and adds some nice interest to your stencil design. In the same idea, I went ahead and created some clean and simple cards using the stencils and also that sentiment. This time I'm not using any spray ink for these cards. I did add a little bit of gold and silver flecks onto these cards using some other spray inks that I had from Tim Holtz. But everything else is just created using the stencils, and I add some heat embossed sentiments in the corners. So you can see the two stencils that I used here. I used the floral drape and the layered medallion bee, and then again the sentiments were from the Bee Strong stamp set. So to create these cards, I went ahead and layered the stencil on top of some cardstock. This one here is a nice purple, and I'm using a bit of Cosmic Berry to add this on here. I'm using my ink dusters for all of my stenciling. I've really found that these ink dusters allow me to get some really nice stenciled effects, and I can control how heavy or light I want to keep the ink blending very easily. I don't have to press too hard or too lightly. I can just kind of brush over top of this, and it will gradually create darker and darker layers of ink on top of my paper the more I layer on top of it. So after I've layered on a bunch of ink, you can see we have this great design stenciled into our paper. And then I added a little border using a scored line, and I used a Copic marker to add some shading around there to go ahead and give it a little bit of depth and interest to the actual panel itself. Now for the floral drape one, I went ahead and stepped up the stenciling a notch by using two different colors. So I first started off with pink, and I'm blending the pink color over top of the entire panel, and that's going to allow us to have a nice subtle pink design. Next, I'm going to go ahead and bring in some Cosmic Berry, and along the bottom edge, I'm going to bring in that purple and start feathering that towards the middle area of the panel. And I'm not going to go all the way up to the top because I want to create a gradient. So I want to go from a darker color to a lighter color on this panel. So it creates a really nice gradient from darker to lighter. So I'll go ahead and take a little bit more of the Coral Berry and go over top of that purple just to blend it out and get everything nice and even and smooth. And then once I've finished all of my blending, I'll go ahead and remove the stencil, and you can see the beautiful gradient that we have here. It's very subtle, but I think it really stands off of this card nicely and creates a beautiful, simple focal point. So then here's a look at how that card finished off. Again, I did the same thing by creating a border with a scoring tool, and then I also used a Copic marker to color in that border just to give it some interest. Now this panel I did not create a card out of, but I wanted to show you the technique because I think it is really fun. So this technique uses the layered medallion stencil. Of course, you can do this with any types of stencils that you have. But I used Distress Oxide ink to create the stenciled effect, and I'll show you how I did that. This is really fun. So I'm taking the stencil, and I laid it on a piece of scratch paper, and I'm going to take my Distress Oxide ink in some broken china, and I'm going to smush this all over top of the stencil to get the stencil completely covered with ink. Once I've covered it completely with ink, I'm going to carefully lay this over top of my paper. This is some Strathmore watercolor paper. And then I'm going to take a baby wipe, and I'm going to wipe all over the stencil to get that ink to transfer from the stencil onto the paper itself. And that creates this really cool, distressed, kind of whitewashed effect. It's really cool. And I think this is really fun to create some fun techniques and backgrounds with. And I'm really excited to be able to turn this into a card at some point. I think this background turned out really fun. It's got an abstract feel to it, so it's not completely perfect, but I think that's what makes it look so interesting. Alright, and now my final card is using the beautiful Amazing You stamp set, and I used all three of the Altenew spray inks. Now what I did on this card was I actually watercolored the flowers with the spray ink. So I used only spray inks and a tiny bit of re-inker on the Coral Berry because I wanted to make it a little bit brighter. But other than that, this was completely done with spray inks, and the results are beautiful. It has a beautiful shimmer to it, and it's just a really fun, beautiful card. So what I did was I took the spray inks and I put them onto a palette, just dropped a little bit of color of each one onto this palette. Next, I'm going to go ahead and take a re-inker. This is a Tim Holtz Candied Apple Distress Re-inker. I just put a couple drops of the re-inker onto my palette, and I'm using that just to darken up the Coral Berry ink just a little bit because it was a little bit more orange than I wanted. I wanted it to have a little bit more of a redder tone. So by using the re-inker, that allows me to still have the shimmery effect of the spray inks, but it deepens up the color a little bit more, which is what I was looking for. So to color this, I'm just carefully going around the flower and just coloring in all of the petals. In some cases, I went ahead and took a little baby wipe and blotted up some of the tips just to lighten them and give myself a little bit of shading. I colored the entire flower this way using only these three colors. I was very careful making sure that I allowed certain petals to dry before adding other color in certain areas because I didn't want to have anything bleed. But otherwise, this was very easy to paint with, and I really enjoyed seeing the shimmery effect of the spray inks translate into a watercolor that creates some really shimmery effects. Now for the green of the leaves, I took a bit of the warm sunshine, and the ocean waves, and I mixed that together to create a nice green color because, of course, blue and yellow make green. And you can change how much of each color that you add to the mixture. Whether you put in more yellow, you'll get a more yellow-green ink, or if you use more blue, you'll get more of a blue-green, which is what I'm doing here. I'm mixing in a bit more of the blue, and I'm having a bit more of a blue-green-teal kind of effect. So it's really fun to be able to mix these together and see what kind of colors you can make. After I had done all of my base coloring, I went back in certain spots of the flowers and deepened up some of the shading because it did dry back a little bit. And when you layer color like this, you intensify the look a bit more. So I wanted to go ahead and intensify the coloring on these flowers just to get more of a contrasted effect. And that was how easy it was to go ahead and create some really beautiful watercolored effects with my spray inks. I also used some sentiments from that same Amazing You stamp set, and all of these cards were really fun and quick and easy to make. So I hope this has given you some more inspiration on using some of the new stencils and spray inks from Altenew. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below, and head on over to my blog where you can get more information on the blog hop and the new release from Altenew. If you enjoyed this video, here are a couple more videos you might find interesting. Thanks so much for watching this video. Please give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more inspiration. Thanks for watching!